Viewers, let's go directly now into this half hour's news bulletin. We'll start off in our top story, which takes us to the United States, where President Donald Trump has claimed that Iran would like to resume dialogue after its tanker was released by Gibraltar. The statement comes as the Iranian oil tanker left Gibraltar after the British overseas territory rejected a U.S. demand to seize the vessel. President Trump said Iran has to find some way to ease tensions with the U.S. because its economy is crashing.
Notice they haven't taken any of our boats. They haven't taken our ships. They've taken ships, but they haven't taken our ships, and they better not. But I will say this. I really think that Iran wants to get there. They have a great potential.
Well, earlier, Gibraltar had said it couldn't seek a court order to detain that ship because U.S. sanctions against Iran are not applicable in the EU. The vessel was captured by British forces on July 4th, alleging it was smuggling oil to Syria. Meanwhile, the death toll from fierce clashes in Syria's Idlib has risen to 97 as government forces have advanced into Khan Sheikhoun town. The Syrian War Observatory says 62 rebel fighters and 35 government soldiers were killed in fighting. It said government forces have entered the key town of Khan Sheikhoun for the first time since they lost control over it in 2014. The town lies on a highway connecting government-held Damascus with the northern city of Aleppo. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry has said the recent U.S.-Turkey safe zone agreement in northern Syria is provocative and worrisome. Last week, Washington and Ankara agreed to set up a joint operations center for a proposed zone along Syria's northeast border. Elsewhere, Libya's UN-recognized government says it has intercepted an armed drone fired by Eastern forces in the northwestern Misrata city. A government spokesman said the city's international airport was the target. The government said its forces will respond to General Khalifa Haftar's offensive soon. The UN's Libya mission has condemned the attacks on civilian infrastructure, calling them a grave violation of international law. The WHO said violent clashes in the country since April 4th have killed over 1,000 people and wounded over 5,500. In Sudan, meanwhile, the opposition coalition has selected 5 people, including a woman, as civilian members of that country's sovereign council. A power-sharing agreement was signed between the opposition and military, paving the way for a transitional government and elections. The agreement designates the Sovereign Council as the highest authority in the country, but it largely delegates executive powers to a cabinet of ministers. As per the accord, the opposition coalition is allowed to choose 5 members of the council and the military another 5. The two sides jointly choose a civilian as the 11th member of the council. Earlier, tens of thousands of people took to the streets of Khartoum to celebrate the final signing of the power-sharing deal. Jordan has summoned Israel's ambassador in protest over violations at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. The foreign ministry said it summoned the Israeli envoy to voice its condemnation. Israeli security forces clashed with Palestinian worshippers last week at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Jordan's diplomatic protest comes days after an Israeli minister said the country should work towards Jews being allowed to pray at the holy site. Jordan's foreign ministry says the kingdom has demanded Israel immediately cease violations and attempts to change the historic status of the site. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is the 3rd holiest place in Islam and a key national Palestinian symbol. In other news, Brexit Secretary Stephen Barclay has signed an order that will end all EU laws applying in Britain from October 31st. Barclay says the legislation sets in stone the repeal of the European Communities Act 1972. The order will bring the European Union Withdrawal Act into force. The repeal of the ECA will take effect when Britain formally leaves the EU on October 31st. The Act saw regulations flow into British law directly from the EU's lawmaking bodies in Brussels. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said signing the document means the UK will take back control of its laws on Brexit Day. Well, Britain's Cabinet Minister Michael Gove says Britain will experience bumps in the road if it leaves the European Union without a deal. Gove added that Britain is more prepared for the outcome than it previously was. More on that now in this report.
According to leaked Cabinet Office papers, Britain will face food and fuel shortage in a no-deal Brexit scenario. Government said the leaked report is out of date and concerns regarding a no-deal Brexit are exaggerated.
I think some of the concerns about a no-deal Brexit have been exaggerated. It's certainly the case that there will be bumps in the road, some element of disruption in the event of no deal. But the document that has appeared in the Sunday Times was an attempt in the past to work out what the very, very worst situation would be so that we could take steps to mitigate that. And we have taken steps.
Michael Gove said he is hopeful that Britain will get a good deal with the EU. Britain is scheduled to leave the EU on October 31st.
Meanwhile, Spain has allowed a charity boat stranded off the coast of Italy to dock at its nearest port. This comes after the migrant rescue vessel declined Madrid's offer to dock in Algeciras, citing a humanitarian crisis. Open Arms said 107 migrants on board were too dire to make a 6-day journey. The rescue group's decision continues the standoff with Italy's Deputy Prime Minister, Matteo Salvini. The Deputy Prime Minister has barred migrants from disembarking, relenting only for 27 minors to get ashore. Earlier, several migrants jumped into the sea in a thwarted bid to reach the shore of Italy. Caught in a domestic political feud, far-right leader Salvini hailed Spain's offer to the migrants as a victory. Meanwhile, the crushing curfew in occupied Kashmir has entered its 15th day as Indian forces continue their siege in the valley. The whole territory is under complete communication blackout since India revoked Article 370 on August 5th. Continuing its state terrorism, occupying Indian forces have detained 4,000 people over the last 2 weeks. A local magistrate told media that civilians have been arrested under the controversial Public Safety Act. He said this law allows Indian forces to imprison anyone for up to 2 years without charge or trial. He also said most of the arrested have been flown out of occupied Kashmir because prisons here have run out of capacity. Sticking with that story, citizens on both sides of the line of control have protested against the ongoing lockdown of Indian-occupied Valley. Protesters on the Pakistani side of the LOC have said they have been unable to speak to their family members in the occupied valley for over 2 weeks. This report now has the details.
Kashmiris continue to demand that India end its lockdown, which has been in effect for 15 days. In Azad Kashmir, demonstrators sat with symbolically gagged mouths outside the Muzaffarabad Press Club. They said it had been a fortnight since they spoke to their relatives across the line of control. They demanded that the international community take notice of India's human rights violations.
I am from a divided Kashmiri family. All my relatives live there in occupied Kashmir. Occupied Kashmir is under curfew for many days. Mosques, pharmacies and shops are locked down and our defenseless brothers and sisters are being tyrannized.
In Srinagar, protesters were seen sloganeering for freedom while waving Pakistani flags.
The day is 24 hours long, out of which they only ease restrictions on movement for about half an hour. I am worried about everything, my children and my family.
Protests against India's revocation of Article 370 were also held in Karachi. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has challenged Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to lift its curfew immediately. He said this was the only way to check how well the Kashmiri populace had received New Delhi's actions.
In another violation of the line of control, Indian forces have martyred 2 Pakistanis in unprovoked firing in the Hot Springs sector. Pakistan's military said the Indian Army used mortars and anti-tank guided rockets on the civilian population. Pakistan's military said it retaliated effectively, killing at least 2 Indian soldiers. It said scores of other Indian troops were also wounded. Well, heavy rains have pummeled the parts of North India, killing 28 people in Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand and Punjab. The Indian National Disaster Management Authority said 22 others are missing in the region. Authorities have issued a flood alert in Punjab and Uttar Pradesh as Yamuna and other rivers reached dangerous levels. Landslides and flooding blocked roads, disrupting the railway schedule. Meanwhile, the death toll from rain-related incidents in the southern states of Kerala and Karnataka has climbed to 197. "15 people have been killed after a truck collided with a passenger bus in the Indian state of Maharashtra. Police said 35 others were injured in that accident in the Dhule district of the state. Police said 8 of the injured suffered life-threatening injuries. The drivers of both vehicles and 9 passengers died on the spot. The bus carrying 45 passengers was heading for Aurangabad city. Elsewhere, 20 people have been killed and dozens of others have been injured after a fuel tanker caught fire in the western Rubirizi district of Uganda. The accident occurred after the driver lost control of the tanker and collided with a stationary vehicle, triggering a fire. Police said the tanker was heading from Kenya to Congo. They said the fire also burnt shops, stalls, a market, and 2 vehicles. A Malaysian court has postponed a trial hearing against former Prime Minister Najib Razak for a week. This is the biggest of 5 trials linked to a multi-billion-dollar scam at State Fund 1 Malaysia Development Berhad. This was done to allow time for the completion of a previous trial against former 1MDB unit SRC International. Najib has been hit with 42 criminal charges of graft and money laundering at 1MDB and other state entities. In next Monday's trial, he will fight 21 charges of money laundering. He will also face charges of illegally receiving about 2.3 billion ringgit between 2011 and 2014. Najib has pleaded not guilty and claims the charges are politically motivated. And coming up next in this bulletin, a glacier has been declared dead to warn about climate change. And Dutch consumers join collective farms as an alternative. Let's begin this segment of the bulletin in Iceland, where environmentalists have laid a commemorative plaque on the site of the melted Ökjökull glacier. The glacier has been declared dead as a warning to the world about climate change. Politicians, scientists, and locals attended the unveiling of the plaque in west central Iceland. The 700-year-old glacier melted throughout the 20th century. Scientists said that in the past 20 years, almost 1 in 5 glaciers on the island has disappeared.
Probably close to 100 glaciers have disappeared during the last century. And now there are 250 to 270 left, which will perish in the next decades and couple of centuries.
Ökjökull was pronounced dead in 2014 as it no longer fulfilled the criteria to be classified as a glacier. Let's now get to news coming out of the Netherlands, where a farm feeding hundreds of locals is not like any traditional ranch. It is the latest innovation for a country engaged in an existential fight against climate change. For more on that now, watch this report.
Chicken roam the orchards, cows chew the cud, and pigs roll in the mud on a warm day on a Dutch farm. But the pastoral scene is not as traditional as it seems. The farm is owned and run by a cooperative of hundreds of local consumers.
It is owned by about 200 households living in or around Boxtel. Together, they rent 20 hectares of farmland. They employ a farmer who produces food for them. We have chickens in the orchard, which provide us with eggs and meat. We eat apples, pears, plums from the orchard. We have about 40 or 50 kinds of vegetables and beef cows.
Appels, peren en pruimen uit de boomgaard.
It aims to change habits in a low-lying country engaged in an existential fight against climate change.
The main purpose for the members is to eat natural products in a sustainable and pleasant way close to home. We see that there is little by little a desire to change the food systems in the Netherlands.
The collective farm idea is groundbreaking in the Netherlands. According to the Dutch Central Statistics Bureau, intensive farming methods have made it the world's second biggest agricultural exporter. But the small country is particularly vulnerable to global warming, in which scientists say agriculture plays a key role.
What we are doing here is what we call a production that is dictated to us by nature, which means that we work with nature. And not everything that grows here, all the herbs you can see here, would be cleaned with spades or even killed with pesticides. We try to collaborate with nature.
It costs €2,000 to join the collective farm and then a weekly fee of around €10 per person. In return, members receive the food they want and stress the importance of knowing what they eat is local and seasonal.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he doesn't want to do business with the Chinese tech giant Huawei due to national security concerns. Trump also rejected concerns that his country's economic growth is faltering due to the ongoing trade war with China. Earlier, the Commerce Department said it will extend Huawei's license for 90 days, allowing it to continue business with U.S. firms. Washington has blocked U.S. companies from selling or transferring technology to Huawei unless they are granted a special license. The current U.S. agreement with the Chinese tech giant ends today. Well, Asian stock markets have risen after China's central bank revealed key interest rate reforms. The bank said it will improve the mechanism used to establish the loan prime rate from this month. The reforms will help steer borrowing costs lower for companies and support a slowing economy due to the ongoing trade war with the U.S. Mainland Chinese shares gained more than 1.5%, while Japan's Nikkei also rose significantly. Hong Kong's Hang Seng jumped more than 2%. South Korea's Kospi and Australia's ASX are also in positive territory. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this news bulletin here at Indus.